guys, how's it going? And welcome to the Rebel Pastor YouTube channel. Pastor Sky over here, and yes, I am back in South Korea. The background is a little bit different than what we're used to because I'm actually filming this from my house. I'm going to tell you this, guys, I'm a little bit exhausted and I have jet lag. I just got back to Korea. I think, what time is it right now? Man, I just got back 12 hours ago and I am ready to crash, but I know that I have to film this too. This is my house I'm in right now. I kind of like the background a little bit better than it kind of comes out a little bit better. I did put this plant here with this lamp over here. Not sure how you guys like this environment or not, but I hope it's something that maybe can be something we can use in the future too. Everyone, if you're here for the very first time, go ahead, hit the subscribe, like, comment, and if you want to really make this channel grow, go ahead and share this video with people who will like this type of comment. Also, yes, we are trying to reach our 10,000 subscribers. We're at around 6,200 right now at this time, but we know that God willing, when the time comes, He will let this channel grow as much as possible. Now, like I said, it's been an amazing time. I was in the US for about 5 weeks. I went to 9 different cities, visiting churches, meeting believers and members of these churches, just talking to them, counseling them, helping them with all the difficulties or the things the questions that they have about the Bible or whatnot. I had an amazing time. I started off in LA. I was there for about a week. Then I went to Houston, Texas, over to Athens, Georgia, down to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, which was my first time ever. Then drove all the way up to Atlanta, Georgia, flew to DC, up to New York, down to Las Vegas. I hit LA again just to take a little bit of a break, and then I drove up to San Francisco, and then I came here to South Korea. So it was an amazing trip, and it's kind of interesting that the significance of me being there. I was there during the wildfires, and then I ended with like a new beginning, meaning it was the day that the new president was inaugurated, President Trump at that time. So very, very interesting, and I thought it was a very I would say a very significant and symbolic time that I was there. So like I said, 9 different churches in 9 different cities, able to counsel, help out the situations that each church was in. But it was really amazing to see how, I was really thinking about how life really comes around full circle. For myself, when I first started, really starting to believe because I wanted to believe, and that was when I was like 19 years old. And when I started reading the Bible, I had so many questions, so many things in my mind I was wondering, and I'd always have these amazing brothers and sisters around me that would help me during those situations and answer those questions. And you get to that point when you really look up to these leaders, these brothers and sisters, and you're like, man, when will I ever become like that? And lo and behold, 25, 26 years later, I'm in the position where I'm able to help those who are young or help those who are struggling in certain positions because of all the different experiences I went through. And I would say one of the biggest realizations I've had, because I met so many people, went to so many different areas, the thing that really gave me comfort, I know that if people, if I thought that I had to answer these questions and give them the answers, I think I'd be overburdened. It's just too much to take on. And you take on these problems and you think to yourself like, oh my goodness, what should I do with this? But one of the greatest things about being in Christ is that we are not solving the problems, like I am not solving it, but it is God using us so that we can help solve other people's issues and problems too. And I thought that was a really comforting thing because it takes off the burden, because it's not about me, but it's all about how can God solve this issue. And that was one of the biggest things that I had in my mind was I would be praying while I'm meeting people is, God, how would you want to answer this? God, what is the thing that you want to tell them right now? And many of those times we're able to have those experiences just talking to people, and they'll say, that's exactly what I need to hear at this time, or no one has ever answered this question to me. And at that time, I can only give glory to God, and I can only thank God for giving that answer. Now, today, I want to share something with you that I had this, I learned on Sunday with a Sunday sermon, and it was about predestination. And we all know that predestination is a very deep concept, but also not only is it deep, it's very controversial, and, because it has to do with our future and our destinies. And I truly believe this. I know that predestination is in the Bible. I'm not going to say it doesn't exist, because it does exist. It's in the Bible. But what we should really realize is predestination and free will is a concept that I don't think that human beings will really fully understand. We can't. It's something that is done by the almighty, omnipotent, omniscient God. And, one time my pastor was telling me, is like, we're always trying to understand God from our own perspective and our own way of thoughts, right? And one of the biggest problems about that is that God is at this level and we're at this level, and we're trying to understand God without there's just too big of a gap. And that's why one of the things that we don't want to overburden ourselves with is to think that there is an absolute, we need to know 100% what the answer is. And the answer is no. Because with time, God gives us more answers. Let me give you a good example. When God first made contact with human beings, it was through Adam and Eve. And he didn't give Adam and Eve every single answer. What did he do? He gave them one rule. And he said, Adam, Eve, this is all you need to know is do not eat that fruit. That's it. And then over 2,000 years later, like 2,400, 500 years later, Moses comes along, and what happened then? God said, let me give you 10. And it wasn't just the 10 commandments. God also gave Moses like another 600, it was like in total 613 laws altogether, including the 10 commandments. And then you go another 2,000 years later to the time of Jesus. What happened? Jesus didn't just take those rules and add on to them. Jesus made the rules even more deeper by saying it's more about our heart. What is lust? What is murder? It is what is done on the inside. So you see that as time goes on, God always reveals more and more. So I think one of the things that we have to realize and recognize is we're not going to have the entire answer from the very beginning, but we need to understand the spirit of what God is trying to tell us, right? So, when you think about predestination, there's arguments on both sides of predestination and free will. And what's the reason, right? The reason is both of those concepts exist in the Bible, right? And this is why it doesn't fully make sense to us when we're trying to, figure out predestination and free will. It's hard because both of them exist, and it feels like they're against each other, right? There are two opposing views in the Bible. So let me give you an example of opposing views, right? Let's start off with Ephesians chapter 1, verse 4 and 5. And what does it say? For he chose us in him before the creation of the world to be holy and blameless in his sight. In love, he predestined us for adoption to sonship through Jesus Christ in accordance with his pleasure and will. So we see that even before we were born, the scriptures tell us we were predestined to be holy and blameless. Now, if you look at 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 20 and 21, what does it say there? It says, in a large house, there are articles not only of gold and silver, but also of wood and clay. Some are for special purposes and some for common use. Those who cleanse themselves from the latter will be instruments for special purposes, made holy, useful to the master, and prepared to do any good work. So what does it say here? It says that, guess what? If you want to be used for special purposes, then you have to cleanse yourself from the latter, and then you'll be used for special purposes, which means that it shows that, no, there is this human responsibility and free will. We have the choice to make ourselves to be used for special purposes. So you see that these two verses kind of come against each other. One is about before you were even born, and the other one is about if you change yourself, you'll be used for bigger and better purposes. Now, remember, both verses are coming from the exact same book. They're both coming from the Bible. So you can't say one exists and the other doesn't. And this is why there's the argument of free will versus predestination. And I think it's something that we're not going to, like I said before, we're not going to fully understand or comprehend it until when? I'm going to tell you this, guys, we're not going to understand it either when the Lord's second coming comes or when you go to heaven and you meet with God and ask Him the question of what is the true concept of predestination, right? So I don't think it's something we should be trying to fully comprehend because we're not going to. But I do believe when I listened to the Sunday sermon, there is a better way for us to think about predestination and free will, right? So when you look at the argument, if everything is predestined, then we kind of look at God as unfair. We kind of look at God as like, well, what's the point of me living my life when everything's controlled anyways? You lose a sense of responsibility, because everything's going to be done for you anyways. You lose hope or you get lazy. And it makes us feel like, man, if everything's predestined, all the bad things are from God. So that makes God look really cruel and bad. And if everything is already set out, that means God is also sending people to hell, right? But we also realize is that, wait, but there has to be something like this because God is omnipotent, omniscient. He is all powerful and almighty. We can't take that away from God either, right? So what we need to understand is both of these sides exist, and what is the best way for us to understand how to live our lives and how to look at predestination, right? We have to look at and use both free will and predestination at the same time. So how does that make any sense? And this was a verse that I saw during the sermon, and I thought this was an awesome verse that gives us a better way to live our lives, understanding both predestination and free will. So it's in Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 26 to 28. And what does it say? It says, "See, I am setting before you today a blessing and a curse. The blessing if you obey the commands of the Lord your God that I'm giving you today. The curse if you disobey the commands of the Lord your God and turn from the way that I command you today by following other gods which you have not known," right? So what this verse really shows is, it's like, hey, there are two paths in life. One is the path of life and one is the path of death. And when I listened to this sermon, it was amazing because he said, think about it this way. Think about the path as predestined, right? So if you take this path, there is only one destination. It is death. And if you take this path, it is predestined. There is only one destination. What is it? It is life. So what determines these two predestined paths? It is your free will of will you obey or disobey God. And he said, like, this is one of the best ways I thought that you can think about predestination is the path is predestined and not the person, right? There is the two paths, and you as the main character, as the protagonist in your life, should think that your free will determines which predestined path you will be on. But what determines whether you're on this path or that path? Well, this is where we have to bring God back into the picture, right? What determines whether you're on the path of life? It's whether you are with God or not. Since it's about obeying and disobeying the words of God, then it's really about whether you are with God or not. How do I know? Well, let's take a look at a verse in John chapter 14, verse 15, which is one of my favorite verses, right? I have plenty of favorite verses though, but this one says, "If you love me, keep my commands." And what God is saying is, if you truly, truly love him, you will keep his commands. Which means it's the same thing that God said in the beginning is, will you obey or disobey the words that I have given you? if you obey or if you are with God, because we know that God is the Word. So if you have the words of God, it means that God is with you, God is within you, right? Because when you take words and you listen to them, you're putting it into your heart, into your mind. If God is with you, then you will be on the right path, right? Which means that you cannot take that path unless you take God with you. So as you live your life, don't just sit there trying to obey the words. We have to take God, live with God, make sure God is a part and participating in every part of our life. And that means we're taking the right path, the path of life. But if you disobey, which means you throw God away, you push God away, it means you will take that predestined path of death. It is your choice. And you have to think to yourself, is like, remember, predestination, we can have a lot of different ideas about it. We're never going to fully understand it until that time comes. So what is the best way for us to really, truly think about it? Don't think that every single thing is just controlled by God like you're a puppet on strings. Because we live our lives and we know that it feels like we are making our own decisions. And a lot of times we can choose this and we can choose that. And you can argue whether, oh, well, God knew you were going to do that, but he really wanted you to do this, and that's why you did that anyways. It's not something that we should argue over. The most important thing, the best way to think is you have the choice to take the path of life or to take the path of death. And the only way to take the path of life is if we do it together with God. As God said, we just read John 14:15, if you love me, you will obey me, right? Don't get too caught up in what does it mean? Do I have choice? Do I not? Well, the Bible says there is both predestination and there is responsibility. Just like, one of the most famous verses that we know is Matthew chapter 7, verse 7. It says, ask, seek, and knock, right? That is our responsibility. And what God is saying to us is, if we ask, seek, and knock, then God's responsibility is to give. God's responsibility is to help us to find it. And God's responsibility is to open the door to us. So, let's not overcomplicate the things in our faith and how we're supposed to live and getting too confused is, well, did God do this to me or not? We have to understand this is our life and live the life. Actually, I heard this one pastor say to me in a very profound way, and he wasn't saying this in a way to disregard God, but he said, sometimes you got to live your life like God's not even there, meaning you got to do it, right? You got to take action and you have to be the one that is responsible for what is happening. All right. So I hope this is something that can help you guys out. So you kind of get rid of all the mess that's inside your head and live your life properly by taking responsibility and doing it together with God as the ultimate and best way. All right. So there it is, guys. Hope you guys really enjoyed today's podcast. I hope it's something that will help you guys out with your faith. This is the Rebel Pastor Podcast. I am Pastor Sky, back in South Korea once again. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Have an amazing and awesome day, and we'll see you guys again next week on the Rebel Pastor YouTube channel. Bye-bye, everyone.
Rebel, never settle, I raise the level. It's time to go, sky's the limit, it's me against the world. Rebel pastor,